Welcome to this month's Millennial Spotlight, brought to you by Lead with Intention. I'm Leslie Bosserman, executive coach and lifestyle strategist, partnering with millennial leaders and their managers. So the purpose of these conversations with millennial changemakers is to deepen and extend the dialogue around how to lead with intention. This month, we're focusing on the intention of being a creator and how to use your energy, passion, and imagination to design and innovate towards positive results. It's my pleasure to be here with Michelle Kusel, a friend of mine who's also a student at Loyola University Chicago in her doctorate of education. She runs a successful greeting card business, serves as a distributor and oily goddess of essential oils, while keeping her partner of 10 years and her 2-year-old son alive. That's quite the accomplishment. She has an undergraduate degree in industrial engineering and a master's degree in education. Michelle's passions are leadership and cheese. So welcome, Michelle. Excited to share your story and feature you more.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. So tell us a little bit about your background as a person, but also as a creator.
Okay, my background. Oof. Sometimes, when I get that interview or that question in an interview or something like that, I'm like, do you have a whiteboard that I can draw it out on? Probably because I am a creator and I'm such a visual person, but also because I have a crazy background that I think has really led me to kind of not accept conventional ways. So as the lovely intro you gave me said, I'm an engineer by degree. And I think that experience began molding me into the creative person I am. And a lot of people look at engineers and they think that they're all math and science and techies. But the heart of engineering is really looking at something and going, why not? Looking at what exists and figuring out what could be. And that's kind of how I approach life. And so that's what drew me to engineering and kept me in engineering, even though, as I later discovered, my passions were very much outside of the realm of engineering, which is what led me to go into education because I love helping people grow into themselves. I also love being incredibly cliche. So you're probably going to hear a lot of cliche quotes, but like helping people become better versions of themselves, which has really helped me become a better version of myself because I'm able to kind of go into a situation and say, who are you and who do you want to become? And through that process and sculpting with someone else, I have no choice but to grow in my own skin. So that has been extremely rewarding in my career in education. So that's how I've become creative as Michelle. And then in creativity through my work, is kind of been incredibly haphazard. I have to say, I can't say that I'm the girl that was, sitting in college in my entrepreneur class going, I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to start a card business. I took an entrepreneurship class and I cursed myself wishing that I had paid better attention in it now. But I don't even remember what our idea was. I just remember it wasn't mine and I had no interest in the class whatsoever. So it definitely has evolved over time. It's evolved over relationships, people who have looked at me and believed in me before I necessarily believed in myself and said, go get him, Tiger. And so that's kind of how it all began. And it just continues to morph into these different beasts. And no two story of mine is the same. I have a greeting card business, I have an oils business, and then I'm off, studying for my doctorate. And I teach in the leadership minor here at Loyola. I have a 2-year-old son who, is a whole different
That's a job in
adventure.
and amongst itself, right?
In and of itself. He's a wonderful, wonderful human being. But, he brings a whole new chapter to life and helps you see things in a way you never imagined you could. And I think that that's kind of the thread that's weaved through my story is just really looking at things and going, wow, I never looked at it that way before.
Yeah, and what I love about just your example here, and I think many millennials resonate with this, is they don't see themselves as just one thing. It's I'm a multifaceted, multi-passionate person, and I'm going to pursue that, and I'm going to mold my life around those things and make a profit, but beyond profit, make like a sense of fulfillment and gain that from all these experiences. And I just love kind of seeing you piece all those things together. I'm curious. So a lot of people who talk to me about being creative or claim that they're not creative, it's because they don't feel like they're artsy or craft people. They're people who don't really see themselves as producing something necessarily. So talk to me a little bit more about the kind of the creative process and how you would define being a creator.
Oh, wow. I don't even define myself as an artsy person, to be honest. Maybe I'm kind of coming into that definition. But I remember when I was in high school, we had homerooms, and my homeroom teacher was the art teacher. And I would always do like locker decorations and stuff for people in our homeroom because I was the student council rep. But I never wanted to take the art class. And she would always come after me and be like, oh, you don't have to be an artist and you don't have to know how to do this or that. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. And I never took the art class. Subsequently, though, I really wanted the tassel that you received when you received like the Art Honor Society, because it was this really awesome rainbow tassel. But it still was not enough to convince me. So I never even took an art class because I thought to myself, I'm not artsy. I can't do this art thing. And it's interesting because I'm an incredibly process-oriented person and I think very methodically. And so when people call me crafty or artsy or creative, I kind of like, it just doesn't feel like it fits me. And so I guess I want to say that out loud to the people that don't think that they're artsy, that that's not what it takes to be creative. I think that creativity is all about the way that you think, and your willingness to try something different, and also your willingness to fail. And I think that that's something that a lot of people struggle with, is the willingness to fail. I love failure. I think it's absolutely phenomenal because it's really only valid. Like it's really only a failure if you stop trying. But every single thing that you screw up, there's something to learn from. And that's, I think, where the creativity piece comes in, is just being willing to get out there and to put yourself out there, to be able to do that.
That's huge. Yeah, the idea of it's really only a failure if you stop trying. That's such a resonant, sage piece of wisdom, because so often we're afraid of how successful we can be, but then there's this place of, well, if I fail, then what will happen? It's like you'll learn more, you'll grow more. And the idea of stopping trying is just preventing anything from happening. So I love how you bring this sense of creativity into this bigger realm of whatever you find in your path, or whatever path you're creating. Like, go for it, risk. Like I love that idea of like failing forward in that sense, and being in that space of co-creation with whatever failure is there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with millennials today, we're afraid to fail because there are so many things stacked against us. You know, the job market isn't what it used to be, and all of these, you know, the interest rates on loans are so high, and et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's so many things. And sometimes I feel like a poser because I'm an older millennial, right? So I, you know, didn't have to deal with even half the things that today's millennials have to work through. And so I feel like in some ways I can't even relate to some of the struggles, but it feels like there's not an option to fail, right? Like, I can't make that mistake because I need to have this happen in my life. I need to get that job after graduation, or I need to be able to pay this loan. And I think something that I fell into, I wouldn't call it lucky, is that I was laid off in 2009 from my job. And it was awful. It was absolutely awful to be told that, you know, your job function was no longer needed, but it forced me in a lot of different directions, because I didn't have that choice anymore. And so it was like, I have to try this or that, because there's nothing else in front of me, and there's no other way that I can make this happen. So I think that in some ways we're put into circumstances where things can go horribly wrong, and they end up being a blessing. But in the moment, it feels awful. And that sometimes it takes that to push us to our limits. And so I just encourage people to try and take those limits before the awful kicks in, you know. That's what I've been trying to do since my layoff, is just to really embrace those life opportunities before something forces me to do that.
That's excellent. Like, that sense of, you get to choose how you're looking at this. You get to choose what lens it's through. And oftentimes we can say, oh, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. But I always encourage people, as they're creating their life, as they're being a creator, even in the worst circumstances, to say, this is the best, worst thing that's ever happened to me because I'm able to learn from it and able to embrace that. And that's huge. So tell me how all of these kind of eclectic and formative life experiences have shaped your creative process. Like if you were to describe the process of creation and even self-creation, what defines that for you?
I think the key life experience that's helped me define my creative process is my interactions in the world and the people around me. And so, in a world today that's so filled with technology, and we talk about how it connects people to one another and to information, it also creates a whole lot of noise. And that can really hinder the creative process. And so for me, it really comes down to, conversations I'm having with people and the ideas that they spark and that I'm able to help them, develop as well. To take my card business for one example is I was talking with my dad about his birthday one year, and he's like, I decided to create a bucket list. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Like totally not my dad, but cool. And I was like, okay. And he's like, yeah, but instead of a B, he's like, I'm totally changing it to an F. And I was like, okay.
A little different, Dad. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's definitely a card waiting to happen, but it was that conversation with my dad and that experience that created that card. I'll be out and about and I will just notice something and you'll see me pull out my phone to take a picture of it so that I can remember it later. So it's just looking at the world around you and seeing it in a way you may have never seen it before. And and again, going back to the technology piece, like I see so many people like running around with whatever the Pokemon game is, and our heads are down in our phones, and it's like we have to stop and look up and exhale and breathe it all in and say, how have I not seen this before? Or in what ways does this look a little bit different? Like what is that person's story and how could it be different? Has been a really creative piece to who I am, because it's forced me to create alternative universes kind of, like whether it's a story for somebody on, why did they, cut me off in traffic, or, on the flip side of like, why did somebody do this good deed? It helps me create different stories.
I love what you're saying about just being present in your environment and using whatever kind of comes to you. So whether it's a great conversation with a friend or family member or something that you just happen to pass by and you're aware. So one of our intentions earlier in the year was mindfulness, and was this concept of just really opening your eyes and opening yourself to the world, to life, and choosing to live with intention and lead from that place of awareness. And I think when we can do that, the creative process is endless. It's something that's not necessarily a recipe or a step-by-step guide to create something, but it's looking at it and saying, what is the world wanting me to call forth today? Like, and how will that unfold? Because I'm willing to maybe just take that first step, or snap
Absolutely.
that picture, or get my head out of my phone. So. Yeah. Now, when you think about other millennials that you see, so whether they're in your kind of peer group or they're the students that you're interacting with on campus and beyond, what do you notice with their approach to creativity and being a creator?
One thing that I've noticed with millennials, and I can't think of the right word, maybe it's a fear, maybe it's just a reservation of being expressive. So I feel like sometimes we're put into this world with a preconstruction of how we're supposed to act and how we're supposed to be. And a lot of times it doesn't align with who people are. So, for example, I mentioned how I instruct one of the leadership courses here, and I noticed students in my class were really reserved in the beginning, very formal, just very Professor Kusel and things of that nature. And it took a lot of work on my part to be kind of open, and I'm a little bit of a sassy individual, and it took a lot of me being that person to give them permission to do the same. And some of them, throughout the semester, I found out were hilarious. And in being who they were we were able to really work with their leadership and hone their leadership development a lot better than when they kind of kept it inside. So I see that as something that's happening, is that in the fear of all the things going on around the world about, job scarcity and just, all the different loans and different issues that we as millennials are facing, that people are sacrificing who they are as individuals in order to hopefully fall into the right circumstances to be successful. And I'm just as much to blame. When probably what it would be about 10 years ago now, I was applying for a job that I thought I really, really wanted. And I made it to the interview round, and I went into the office and I interviewed for the job. And I could tell, I knew what they wanted from this person. And so I acted that part. I told them everything they wanted to hear because I really wanted to get this job. And I got the job. So yay me. But what happened was that I had to act like that person in the interview every single day I went into the office. And I was incredibly unhappy at the job.
That's exhausting.
It was, because it wasn't who I was. And, it was a very hard lesson for me because I had to leave that job 6 months later because it was such a horrible fit for me that it was affecting my physical health. And I actually went back to my old job, tail between my legs, and said to my boss, I made a mistake. Will you take me back? And it was a very humbling experience. But fortunately, they hadn't replaced me yet. And he said, come home. We'll take you back. So wow. It was wonderful that they were able to do that for me. But I think what I learned in that lesson was that I need to be me, and being me is good enough. And that's kind of like the message I would have to millennials is be who you are. And that's good enough. Become a better version of yourself. Don't become a version of someone else, because it's going to cripple you in the long run. Because from there on, I owned myself. I would go on job interviews and joke with people, about one time I was offered an Altoid during a job interview. And so my response was, is that a hint? As opposed to like, no, thank you, or anything like that. Because I was like, you know what? You need to learn that I have a little bit of a jokester in me. And if you want that in your department, great. And if not, then this isn't going to work anyway. And it's easy to say, I understand that. But I think that we have some amazing millennial talent out there that sometimes get suffocated because of the fear of being who they are and that not being who someone else wants them to be.
Well, it's that space of just giving yourself permission to be authentic. So whatever creation or creating looks like to you, like you said, own it. Don't try to be somebody else's prototype. Absolutely. Really own it and let that be enough. So do you have any other pieces of advice for millennials who are just either struggling with this or want to be able to be seen for being creative?
I think the big is to give it time. We're in a hurry to try and figure things out tomorrow. And what I'll tell you is that, when did I graduate? I'm just under 15 years out of college. So I'm kind of like this poser of a millennial, like where I'm at like the edge of it. But I definitely relate a lot more to the millennials than Gen Xers. And so when I graduated, I had thought like, wow, this is who I'm going to be for the next, 50 years or whatever. And I think we've come a long way from that. So look at what's in front of you and think about who you want to become and figure out the steps that you need to get to that point, and know that it's going to evolve, and be okay with that ambiguity. Because living in that ambiguity is probably the most fun piece of it. It's really tough, but as somebody who literally just quit their full-time job to become a doctorate student, I'm embracing that and embracing that time and creating that intentional space to figure out what's going to make me happy, because we only get one life, and so let's make it worth it, and let's make sure taking care of the people that matter to us and that we're hearing their voices and their feedback, but that at the end of the day, you are the only person that has to live your life. You get up, you go to work, and you do that job. No one else is doing that job for you. So make sure it counts, make sure you love it, and make sure that you're embracing all the little voices, positive voices in your head that give you that spark of like, hey, what about this? Or hey, did you think of that?
Yeah, so much of it, like you said, is just listening and noticing. And when you get that excitement, when you get that spark, what do you then do with it? Do you
Absolutely.
entertain it? Do you play with it? Do you engage it? Or do you stifle it and muffle it because you just don't know what to do yet? And I think that spark is the first step in creation.
Absolutely. I think you can't stifle it. Even if you postpone it or something like that, write it down and remember that it exists because it's your inside, it's your voice and your calling that's coming out there. And so you don't want to ignore it.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. That's just beautiful. So I want to thank you so much for just being with us today and sharing just so much insight and so much of yourself and being vulnerable enough to create with us. That's been such a delight.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So as you continue exploring creativity this month, make sure to check out leadwithintention.com for more perspectives of other millennial changemakers and some really fun graphic images. Thanks again for being with us. This is Leslie Bosterman inviting you to join the wholehearted leadership revolution as you continue leading with intention.